I used to dream my wedding day would be full of laughter, a new beginning with the man I loved. But the closer it got, the more I felt like a stranger in my own story. The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a message, a photo. Jackson, my fiancé, was holding Alina in a hotel room, the tie I gave him wrapped around my sister's wrist. Hi, I'm Lena Rivera, but in my family, I'm just Alina's sister. That name, Alina, shines like a spotlight. Me, I've always lived in the shadows it casts. Since we were kids, I've gotten used to being forgotten. I'm not someone who complains. I studied hard, became independent, always did things right and on time. But to my family, that was just expected. When I showed Mom my A+, she'd nod and say, "Well, you're the older sister, of course." But Alina, once she broke Mom's favorite vase and just had to blink and apologize to get swept into her arms, she's sensitive, don't be too hard on her. I never hated Alina. Back in 3rd grade, she scraped her knee in the school bathroom, and I ran around the neighborhood just to find the right cartoon Band-Aids. I sat beside her, telling jokes until she stopped crying, even though my hands were shaking with worry. But over time, that love got worn down, chipped away by every moment I realized, for every step Alina took forward, I was being pushed a little further back into the dark. Then came Jackson, like a lifeline. He was the first man who looked at me before he looked at her. Our first date, he picked an Italian place I'd once mentioned in passing. The emerald ring he used to propose, identical to the one I'd saved on Pinterest. "I see you," he whispered, and I believed him. But then, the day I told my mom we were engaged, she blurted out, "Why not Alina? I always thought Jackson was more her type." She laughed like it was a joke, but I heard the thorn in her tone, sharp and cold. "I met him first, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I know. Just, you two don't have the same vibe." She shrugged, like she was talking about a shirt that didn't quite fit. That comment haunted me. I started noticing Alina more. The way her fingers accidentally brushed Jackson's when handing him coffee. Her jokes like, "Better watch out, sis, I might just steal your man," followed by a bright laugh, though her eyes glinted like a blade. It started small. Alina accidentally sent Jackson a selfie in a spaghetti strap top, asking, "Which one should I wear to the party?" Jackson told me he had meetings, but then I saw a message pop up from Alina, "I'm already at the cafe." I asked him about it. He chuckled, ruffled my hair. "She's your sister. I see her like family." But the way he said, "like family," his voice dipped, like he was trying to convince himself. At my dress fitting, Alina slipped on a tight wine red satin gown, the color of temptation. Just for fun, she laughed, spinning in front of the mirror. Jackson froze. His eyes stayed on her curves just a second too long. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was imagining things. Jackson loved me. We'd been through too much, shared too much. He wouldn't throw it all away over a moment of weakness. But what I couldn't understand was, if something had happened, why didn't they try to hide it? Why keep teasing me like this, unless they knew I wouldn't fight back? I used to dream my wedding day would be full of joy, a celebration of love, but now I felt like an extra in a play where someone else had taken my lead role. The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed again, a text from Alina. "Don't be mad, but Jackson and we couldn't help it. He said I'm the one he really wants." And the photo? Jackson, holding her, the tie I gave him tied around her wrist. I shot upright, my makeup kit clattered to the floor. What was this feeling? Not heartbreak, something worse, a void. Like I was the punchline of some cruel joke the universe had been telling my whole life. Because here I am, still sitting in my childhood bedroom, the wedding dress hung neatly on the closet door, lipstick unopened, and inside me, a strange, eerie emptiness. I don't know it yet, but by tomorrow morning, I won't just lose the man I love. I'll lose the last remaining sliver of trust I had in my family, And I'll be left wondering, has anyone in this house ever truly believed I was worthy of being loved? I couldn't sleep that night. The room felt twice as big, every object around me cold and sterile. I wanted to cry just because the yellow light was too bright. The wedding was only a few hours away. I stared at my screen, my fists clenched so tight that my nails left crescent marks in my palms. Eventually, with trembling hands, I opened my contacts. Alina, then Jackson. I hovered over their names. I wanted to call. But what would I even say? What could I ask? I hit call. 1, 2. No answer. I called Jackson. His phone was off. It felt like a knife slicing through my chest, not because of pain, but humiliation. I thought about the time I told Alina how Jackson abandoned his birth mom after his parents' divorce, how he'd gone bankrupt once and clawed his way back. I trusted her with that, thought she was someone who could keep a secret. Turns out, I was wrong. By the time morning came and everything really began to fall apart, I still hadn't cried. At 7 a.m., I got up just like the schedule Mom had drawn up 3 months earlier. Light breakfast, warm foot soak, then off to hair and makeup. But the makeup artist called, asking, "Hey, can we push the time back a bit? The groom hasn't shown up yet. And your sister, Alina, right? She's not here either." I felt my breath catch. "What did you say?" "Alina, she told us yesterday she'd be there to help you, but she's not picking up." I froze. I glanced at my phone, then opened the family group chat. Mom had just sent a photo of the framed portrait they'd hung in the reception hall. "Should we adjust the lighting above this?" she asked. No one noticed Jackson was missing, or Alina. I typed into the group. "Mom, have you heard from Alina? What about Jackson? Has anyone gotten through to him?" 2 minutes later, Mom called, her voice sharp with irritation. "What kind of question is that? They're probably just busy with the wedding stuff." I kept my voice even. "I got a message. I think they might have run off." Silence. Then a bitter laugh. "What kind of nonsense is that? Don't act like a spoiled child at the last second." "I'm serious, Mom." "Then send me proof." I sent the screenshot, the message, the photo. No one replied. An hour later, guests began arriving at the church. I was still sitting by my bedroom window, half-finished makeup on my face. The wedding dress hung neatly in the corner. And I waited, because some part of me still wanted to believe they'd come back, that there was some kind of explanation. But no, at 10 a.m., the priest called. "Has the groom arrived?" I bowed my head. "No." He sighed. "Then I suppose I should return for the day." When I walked downstairs, my mother was on the sofa, face red with anger. She didn't look at me, didn't ask if I was okay. The first thing she said was, "You've humiliated this entire family." I turned to her, stunned. "You couldn't hold on to that man, and now you're making a scene like someone owes you something." I choked. "You think I wanted this to happen?" "It doesn't matter what you wanted. What matters is what did happen, and now you've made us all look bad." I screamed, "I was betrayed." She shot up, finger pointed in my face. "You think you're the victim here? Or are you just the kind of woman who can't even keep her man? Alina's 5 years younger and didn't even try, and she still got him. What does that say about you?" I laughed, a cold, hollow, terrifying laugh. In that moment, I understood. My family had never stood by me. Not when my first boyfriend hit me behind closed doors. Not when I lost my scholarship, working nights to help with bills. And not now. Not even now, when my own sister betrayed me. I packed my things in silence, left the dress hanging there like some cruel joke. That night, I checked into a small hotel room in Manhattan. Alone, I finished a bottle of white wine, watching the city shimmer beyond the glass. And for the first time, I asked myself a painfully honest question. If no one stands with me, then what the hell do I do next? It's time to start over. No more tears, no more screaming for sympathy. I'll make a plan, and this time, I don't need anyone's approval. I'll force them to see me, not with pity, but with awe. I'll walk into the one place they never expected to see me, glorious. And there, I'll make sure both of them, Alina and Jackson, regret it for the rest of their lives. Time moved like icy water, quiet, indifferent, and merciless. The first few days after I left my mother's house felt like slipping into a black hole. I slept at odd hours, barely ate, and avoided mirrors because I couldn't bear to see the face of the woman who'd been left behind at the altar. I wasn't a bride anymore. I was a punchline. But what I didn't expect was that the betrayal wasn't the worst part. 3 days after their disappearance, online tabloids started running with it. Groom and sister elope just hours before wedding. Bride reportedly had anger issues. I went numb reading those headlines. Leaked photos of me in a wedding dress, red-eyed, standing in front of the church. Who took them? Who released them? And why? Was the story twisted to paint me as the problem? An anonymous comment read, "See, grooms don't run for no reason. Maybe the older sister was just a controlling psycho and he found peace with the younger one." I couldn't breathe, not because of the rumor itself, but because I suddenly knew who had spun the story that way. It was Alina. Somehow, she turned me into the woman who was left because she wasn't lovable enough, while casting herself as the one who was truly chosen. No apology, no shame. She made betrayal look like a love story. Jackson said nothing, like he'd never promised to protect me from the world. And my mother? She threw Alina a birthday party exactly 1 week after my wedding fell apart. I found out through photos. Mom, Alina, and Jackson, hand in hand, all smiles beneath string lights. And in the background, friends I thought were mine, the ones who had sworn they'd always have my back. They chose a side, and it wasn't mine. That was the moment I realized I had died in their eyes a long time ago. But instead of crumbling, I stood up. I pulled every last dollar from my savings, cut ties with everyone, deleted every social media account, and started from absolute zero. I took a temp job at a small event company in Brooklyn. The pay was minimal, but my boss, Diane, was a sharp, elegant, older woman with eyes that saw everything. She asked me on my first day, "So, what did you do before this?" I answered honestly. I was almost a bride. Got dumped. She raised an eyebrow. "Then you know what it takes to plan a wedding, don't you?" I chuckled. Too well. She didn't ask another question, just handed me a blueprint for her daughter's engagement party. "Start with this. If you pull it off, you stay." I didn't sleep for a week. I designed the stage, curated the menu, handpicked music for each transition down to the second. When the event ended, she pulled me aside and said just one thing. "You just saved my family's reputation. From now on, I'll protect yours." Diane was the first turning point in my resurrection. 1 year later, I wasn't the girl left crying beside a wedding cake anymore. I was creative director for one of New York's top-tier event firms, managing charity galas, international summits, and multi-million-dollar weddings for the elite. I changed how I dressed, no more soft creams and pastels. It was black blazers, silk bodycon dresses, dark red lips, and heels sharp enough to draw blood. I chose every word I spoke like a scalpel. I knew how to silence a room with one look. And then fate, or maybe karma, brought them back to me. I was leading preparations for the Solstice Ball, a black tie gala uniting top names in finance, real estate, art, and media. I was in charge of the whole thing. A major investor wanted a private meeting. My assistant handed me the appointment. I saw the name and nearly laughed. Jackson Wexley, newly appointed CEO of Brookstone Capital. I wondered, did he recognize mine? I didn't cancel. I didn't hide. I waited. The night of the event, I wore a black silk mermaid gown, backless, molded to every curve I once felt the need to hide. Hair in soft waves, crimson lips. I entered the room like a silent symphony, commanding every gaze without a word. And just as I expected, Jackson stood the moment he saw me. The first word out of his mouth, "You." I smiled, extended a hand. "Miss Rivera, project director of the Solstice Ball. Lovely to meet you, CEO Jackson." His eyes froze. But the real surprise? Alina, standing beside him, now his fiancé. When she saw me, her grip on Jackson's arm instinctively tightened, like she could feel the storm rising. I walked past them, never let my gaze linger. But what they didn't know was that I had one last act, a speech, a vow that had never been spoken aloud, but was about to leave the entire room breathless. Backstage, I held a single sheet of paper, printed in Times New Roman, double-spaced. At the top, italicized, "Sponsor Appreciation Speech, Miss Rivera." But that was just the surface. What it really was the wedding speech I had written a year ago, slightly edited, just enough to slip past suspicion, except for two people, Jackson and Alina. They were sitting in the second row, left of the stage. Jackson had his arm draped over the back of Alina's chair. Their outfits matched. He in a charcoal tux, she in a silver strapless gown, golden hair in soft waves. But I didn't see love in their eyes. I saw fear. No matter how well they masked it, I recognized the tightness in their hands, the strained smiles every time a camera swept past. Because they knew me, and they knew I've never let those who stepped on me walk away unscathed. The MC's voice echoed with reverence. "Please welcome the woman behind tonight's resounding success, the architect of one of New York's most exquisite galas, Miss Rivera." Applause rose like a wave. I stepped into the spotlight. Over 300 guests in gowns and tuxedos looked up. Live cameras rolled, projecting me onto the massive screen behind. I waited a few beats, let silence settle. Then I spoke. 1 year ago today, I stood on a different stage, not to speak, but to wait for a man who promised to love me for the rest of his life, but he never showed. Chairs shifted. Instead, he ran away with the person I trusted most, and in doing so, stole not just love, but dignity, trust, and family. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. I didn't stop. I'm not saying this to grieve. I'm saying it because that moment made me who I am now. The camera cut to Alina. She was pale. I turned to face the audience. Because when everything falls apart, you have two choices: sit in the rubble and cry, or stand up and rebuild, barehanded, heartbroken, and fueled by the silence of those who swore they'd stand with you and didn't. From an envelope, I pulled out a wedding invitation, my wedding invitation. The room went utterly still. I held it high. This was meant to be read at my wedding, but tonight, I'm reading it somewhere far more worthy, under the lights, in the presence of power, and in front of the people who once believed I'd never rise again. I read each line like a blade. I promise to love you, not because you are perfect, but because you are brave enough to show me your flaws. I promise never to leave when storms come. Unless you leave first." My voice dropped. And you did. But it wasn't into a storm. It was into the arms of the woman who used to call me sister. A sharp gasp from somewhere near the front. A breath caught. Jackson stood abruptly. But he couldn't move. His eyes darted. His hands clenched. I gave him a quiet smile. "So tonight, I say this. I forgive you. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm too strong to carry what doesn't deserve to come with me. I won't say your name. I don't need you to come up here. I just want to return the one thing that ever tied us together." I held up the wedding ring. Under the lights, it sparkled so fiercely the room blinked. And then, gently, I let it fall into a champagne glass. Clink! The sound of metal on crystal rang like a bell in a cathedral. I lifted my chin. My eyes locked with Jackson's. He was now at the edge of the stage, face twisted in chaos. Security began moving toward him, but I raised a hand. "It's okay. He doesn't get to ruin my night anymore." The room erupted. Applause crashed around me like thunder. Some people stood. Others whispered. Phones came out, filming. But not one person, not one, looked at Jackson and Alina like they were the perfect couple anymore. I stepped down from the stage, past them slowly, bowed my head slightly. "Wishing you both happiness, especially now that there's nothing left to lose." And I walked out of that hall to the soft swell of piano music, every step a final period at the end of a sentence written in pain. But that wasn't the end, because I still had one last card in my hand, one that wouldn't just ruin their image, it would wipe the whole board clean. I thought after that night, they'd stay quiet. I thought that after my speech flipped New York's elite on its head, Jackson and Alina would slink away in shame. I was wrong. A week later, I got an email from Brookstone Capital's legal department. "We demand a formal apology for defamatory statements made publicly against Mr. Wexley, which have caused damage to his personal and professional reputation." I laughed out loud. Cowards. They betrayed me, slandered me, and now that the truth scorched their image, they dared to sue? I forwarded it straight to my lawyer, Mason. A sharp mind wrapped in quiet charm, the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because his words slice cleaner than steel. We'd reconnected by chance through Diane, and since then, he'd become a fortress around everything I'd rebuilt. In his reply, Mason wrote, classic Mason, "We are happy to proceed to court. However, should your client wish to make public the complete record of undisclosed bonuses, assets held under proxy names, and insider-linked investments involving Miss Alina Rivera, we'd be happy to assist the press with context." 3 hours later, they withdrew the claim. But that was only the prelude. I moved my pieces, quietly, cleanly, without scandal, with strategy. I reached out to 3 major investors currently funding Brookstone Capital. They'd all been at the gala, had all complimented my speech. I didn't badmouth Jackson. I simply sent them this. "The redevelopment of the Grove is entering a fresh bidding phase. Our firm can provide a fully staffed, experienced team and a viable, future-proof plan. If you're seeking sustainable, long-term returns, we welcome a private discussion." Clear, cold, precise. 3 days later, Brookstone lost 2 major funding agreements, one worth over $8 million. Jackson must have known it was me, but he couldn't say a word. I hadn't broken a single rule. I was just better, and I wasn't done. Alina went on a podcast, her voice syrupy sweet. "What we have is real. There was no betrayal, not like the media claims." I didn't even flinch. I simply forwarded the original chat log, the airdropped message I'd received the night before the wedding, to a high-profile feminist blogger. The article went viral, over 400,000 shares in a day. Screenshots side by side, Alina's sob story versus her flirtatious, mocking texts sent while I was still choosing flower arrangements. By sunset, Alina had lost 2 PR contracts with major cosmetic brands. I didn't touch them. I just let the truth speak and watched them choke on it. Then came the day of reckoning. Brookstone organized a press conference to unveil a game-changing new project, hoping to salvage their reputation. Jackson sat center stage, still polished, still poised, but the glint in his eyes was gone. He looked like a man clinging to the last threads of his power. I walked in right on cue, representing the rival investment firm, the one that had just officially won the bid for the Grove. The room froze. Jackson stared at me like I was a ghost he'd buried, now back, sharper, stronger, absolutely real. I smiled, took the stage, my voice calm and collected. It's unfortunate that some previous contenders lacked the financial capacity to continue with this project, but the market rewards evolution, not relationships. The camera cut to Jackson, his jaw clenched, eyes darting like a cornered animal. I turned to the room. Our vision for the Grove is to create the first residential community in the city that blends AI technology with immersive art spaces, drawing inspiration from the missteps of the past. A harmless line, but everyone knew exactly what I meant. The applause was thunderous. As for me, I returned to my office, opened my inbox. There it was. Congratulations, you've been nominated to this year's 50 Most Powerful Women in Real Estate list. I looked out the window. New York's skyline glittered like it always had, but for the first time, the light didn't come from out there. It came from me. I'd taken everything back, without screaming, without revenge porn, without fighting over a man. Just clarity, just power, just belief in myself. But there's still one thing left undone. A promise. The vow I whispered to myself the night I was left behind. I'll make you know what it means to lose everything. And for the rest of your lives, every time someone asks, "How did you fall this far?" they'll answer with my name. That time is coming, and I'll keep that promise in the most beautiful way possible. I once heard someone say, "The best revenge for a woman is to live gloriously every day." But I'm not like most women. I want to live gloriously and get revenge gloriously. I didn't need blood. I needed them humiliated on the very stage they once believed they owned, New York high society. And the opportunity came faster than I expected. The city planning department invited me to be a featured guest on the live TV special Urban Visionaries, a segment honoring pioneers in urban design reform. I was the rising face after the Grove win. The theme of the night? City of the Future, where women lead the change. When the producers asked if I wanted to invite someone to join me for the Vision and Lesson segment, I smiled and said clearly, "Alina Rivera, she'll have a lot to share." She couldn't say no. Alina's reputation was in freefall, and appearing on a program this major could help rebuild her image. They thought I was extending an olive branch. They thought I wanted to make peace. I didn't. I wanted the truth, spoken out loud for the whole country to hear, from the mouth of the one who broke me. The studio that night glowed under soft lights, filled with high-profile guests. I wore a pearl white suit, hair in a sleek chignon, nude matte lips, elegant, minimal, razor sharp. Alina showed up in a pastel pink dress with a square neckline and a smile sweeter than artificial sugar. The host opened. "You're sisters by blood, but your paths have taken very different turns. One into real estate, the other into public image. What brings you both here tonight isn't just your careers, but a story that once shook the city." The room held its breath. I smirked. Perfect. No need to throw the first punch. The host turned to Alina. "Alina, can you tell us anything about what happened a year ago?" My sister pressed her lips together, playing vulnerable. I think we all make mistakes, and sometimes love comes at the wrong time. I placed my hand gently on the mic. It's not that they ended up together that I blame, it's how they did it. Silence swept through the studio. The host went still. No one dared interrupt. I continued. If he had been honest, if she had come to me with a simple apology, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here today. But they didn't. They disappeared, without a word, without a message, and left me standing in front of a church with 100 guests waiting. I lifted my chin, eyes locking onto the camera. I share this not for sympathy, but because I believe this. Strong women are not born from privilege. They're forged in the wounds no one else bothers to stitch. Alina opened her mouth to respond, but the host gently cut in, pivoting back to me. And after all that, you've become one of the most powerful women in the industry. Do you think the betrayal made you? I didn't flinch. Absolutely. They didn't just betray me, they built me. This version, this success. So thank you to both of them. I turned, looked directly at Alina, and for the first time, her eyes lost their steadiness. She looked like she finally understood. She hadn't just broken up a wedding. She'd awakened something that can't be broken. The next morning, the internet exploded. Clips of me saying they built me flooded social media, set to cinematic music, captioned, "Don't fight a woman who rose from betrayal. She's made a symbol of rebirth and resilience." Alina, labeled forever as the sister who stole the groom. No PR could scrub that away. The fallout was swift, brutal. The last brand pulled its endorsement from her. A week later, Jackson was forced to resign by Brookstone's board after internal audits exposed asset transfers to a third party, a name tied to Alina Rivera. The golden couple who once thought they were untouchable, reduced to nothing more than two pretty faces with no future. And me? I was invited as keynote speaker at Women Who Rebuilt, a summit for women shattered by love, family, or betrayal. I closed my speech with this line: "When they stab you, don't just bandage the wound, sharpen it, and carve your name at the top with the blade they left behind." The room rose in thunderous applause. I looked into the front row and saw my mother, the same woman who once told me I disgraced the family, now sitting there, tears in her eyes. Maybe she finally understood that the daughter who was once barely mentioned is now the name the entire city has to mention. After everything, I no longer needed to expose them, because now, anytime someone typed Jackson Wexley plus scandal or Alina Rivera plus sister's groom into Google, the truth was already there for the entire world to see. The silence I once swallowed was now broadcast in headlines. But what I gained wasn't just their collapse, it was my resurrection. A few months after the Women Who Rebuilt conference, I received a handwritten letter, not an email, not a text, scented paper, soft script, from my mother. "My daughter, maybe I was wrong. Wrong to think you were just a shadow beside Alina. Wrong not to see the strength in your eyes all those years. I'm sorry for choosing the one who walked away on your wedding day. I won't ask for forgiveness. I only hope that one day you'll let me see you in a wedding dress again. This time because you chose it, and you shine." I folded the letter and took a long breath. I didn't cry, but something in my heart softened. Later that day, I messaged her one line: "When I'm ready, I'll let you know." One crisp fall morning, I stepped out of my newly finished penthouse on West 57th Street, coffee in hand, Mason by my side, the only man who never left. He wasn't Hollywood handsome, but in his eyes, I found something I had once ached for: steadiness. He never needed the spotlight. He just stood there, quiet, constant. And when the world turned its back, he was the first to say, "I believe in you." We never said, "I love you," never spoke of marriage. But that day, as I stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park, he took my hand and said, "If one day you want to walk down the aisle, let me be the one waiting at the end of it." I smiled, teasing, "You think you can handle my family's drama?" He kissed my hand softly. "I can, because now you write the script. You're not the side character anymore." Our wedding took place a year later. No spectacle, no press, just 80 people, every one of them someone who stayed when the storm hit. My mother walked me down the aisle. Her hands trembled, but her eyes held nothing but pride. I chose a simple gown, off the shoulder, no lace, no frills, just a silhouette that embraced every inch of the woman I'd become, a woman who knew exactly who she was. When I reached the end of that aisle, Mason turned to look at me like the world had gone quiet. No tears, no regrets, only peace. The next morning, I found a handwritten note on my nightstand. "You don't need to fight anymore, because to me, you've already won. You are the most beautiful declaration to the world, that a woman can be broken, but she can never be defeated." I looked out the window. Morning light spilled across my unbrushed hair, gold and soft like silk. I was no longer the girl abandoned at the altar. I was the woman who made an entire city look up, who turned rubble into a throne, who was betrayed by her own sister, but still chose to rise, wipe the blood from her palms, paint her lips, and step onto the stage of her life like a queen. Because I know one thing for certain. Women don't need swords to get revenge. They just need to live so brilliantly, the world handles it for them.